Welcome to Empire. Christy, you were brought into USAID in order perhaps to inject a new spirit into what or how diplomats do things. So in a few words, how would you brand what you do? What is USAID?
I would say USAID of today is around the world in many, many countries, and we're on the ground helping do development, which is get kids educated, put health systems together and get communities access to medicine, give them energy, build up local organizations to help voice concerns of citizens around the world.
That sounds missionary to me.
It is.
You're a missionary? You're like a voice of God of some sort?
I would say there is certainly an element of idealism and a belief that we can help contribute to fixing the big problems in the world.
So why not their governments helping getting them educated and so on?
Governments are not able to do everything. I think we see that even in the United States.
But you work for the American government.
I work actually for what is called an implementer. So I am working for a private consulting firm. We're around the world in 100 and some countries, and we have several thousand people working. And
paid for by the American government?
Paid for with the American government, but we're also paid for by the British government, and we're paid for by the Swedish government, and we're paid for by the World Bank and the UN. Yes.
How is that different in the Voice of America, David?
We're funded by the United States government.
Right. And you supposedly represent a voice of freedom around the world, but you're not free yourselves.
How do you mean?
You work for the US government. You're not free. You work according to an agenda, to a policy, to a state interest.
What we do is we basically export the First Amendment, the concept of freedom of speech. And the goal of VOA is to give reliable, honest information to audiences around the world. It is the US government that decides which audiences and how much money will be spent. But what we do is we implement a charter that says three things. First, supply reliable information, objective as far as one can be, honest information to the audiences we ask you to give it to. Second, present our country, explain it. The wonderful, big, complicated country. Foreigners are often interested in it, sometimes perplexed by it, so we try to present it.
So what is it you're doing that CNN doesn't do? Or ABC or NBC? Why can't you just leave it to the private sector?
How many languages is CNN in? Not very many. Mm-hmm. We're in 45. CNN doesn't broadcast in Hausa to northern Nigeria. CNN is not letting people know in the villages of northern Nigeria where the last Boko Haram attack was, or in Liberia where the worst raging Ebola is. We are much more focused on what matters to audiences, and we talk to them in their own languages in many cases. We also do English and French and Spanish and so forth.
But the agenda behind what is important to people is what's important for the United States.
It's important for the United States that people around the world be well informed. That's, we think, in the US national interest. We don't like to see dictatorships that impose censorship and try to keep their people stupid. And it's a matter of policy for the United States to try to prevent that. So
what is it then for the both of you? What is Brand America then? What is it that you represent around the world?
Brand America. This is a big, complicated, wonderful, sometimes awful place, the United States of America. I love it, and I love what it stands for. But I'm first to admit it has many flaws. One of the things that VOA does is to report honestly about the United States. We don't shirk from stories that may not make the United States look wonderful.
Christy, what do you think of what you say, what David is saying?
I think he's speaking exactly in the context of his mandate, which is certainly a different mandate than the foreign aid and development work
How is that
I'm
different?
doing. Our primary concern and everyday conversations are all about, are we getting it right and improving the lives of the people in the developing countries that we're serving? That's what development assistance is about.
So you want to improve their physical life. He wants to improve their mental mindset, I guess, or something.
I would say development has moved very far away from giving the physical stuff. Although if you ask me what the brand of America is in development, I would certainly say we're seen as, since we're in the spirit of Christmas, oftentimes like a Santa Claus that has a bundle of gifts. We're going to give stuff. We're also seen, I think, as we're going to fix stuff. We're a very, that American can-do spirit is not suppressed in development. That is both, I think our brand is both a strength and a weakness, because the very can-do, we can fix it, we know the answer, gets us into trouble and doesn't always allow us to do the best job.
It's actually messianic, no?
I wouldn't say it's messianic, but I would say that it's driven by a real passion to do good. And I think that's really a part of the American spirit. And I think it sometimes gets misunderstood. I think it gets lost in the mix.
When you look at the global American foreign policy, are you the firefighters? The CIA and the Pentagon inflame the world, and you go out there and try to put off the fires. Make people around the world love America, even when the Pentagon and the CIA don't exactly do a great job.
You know something? I don't think that people's attitudes to America around the world are as much shaped by what we are and what we do as they are about what those people are and what they do. I think today, the most pro-American country on earth might well be Iran. And it's not because of anything that America's done. But again, it is because the people in Iran do not like their own government very much.
So resolve this paradox for me. Christie's organization, or USAID in general, helps countries like Jordan, like Egypt, like Turkey, and others. Right? How come, according to Pew, America's ratings is the lowest in the world in the countries you help most, Egypt and Jordan and Turkey?
I think people's attitudes towards America are shaped by the circumstances that they find themselves in domestically. And frankly, being the biggest power on earth means that people shape their perceptions of reality against, vis-a-vis, the United States very often.
So what you're
saying, the other thing that happens is...
So if you're popular in Iran, why aren't you popular in Egypt? That's the question. They're both Middle Eastern countries. You help one of them and you have lower ratings there. So it must be about something that you do.
So I'm just trying to say to you, I don't think it is. I think it's about attitudes inside those countries that are often shaped by other forces. There are governments that spend a lot of time and effort trying to make their population anti-American and use that as a unifying element to help keep their governments in power. So sometimes it has to do more with propaganda from the local government than it does with the United States.
I don't think there's a one-to-one relationship, though, between doing good on the ground in Egypt and getting that all-positive attitude about the United States. I think there are limitations to the work that is done with foreign assistance and development, even when it's done really, really well. It doesn't get to scale. And I also think that development has a real conundrum about changing behavior and opinion. It doesn't necessarily mean that because you have a school in that village and you have a healthcare system in that village and that they've been put in by the US government and sustained and people are trained and life is better, that there are competing forces also that come to bear that change opinions, and development doesn't necessarily in the end of the day.
But you go on in places like Iraq or Afghanistan or where you were stationed once upon a time, and you actually dictate to a certain degree what the sort of development or the sort of help that you give will be conditional on certain things. So you actually attach a whole bunch of conditions and dictate how development needs to go there according to how you see it.
I think that development has made big mistakes about dictating too much. I think part of that comes out of the exuberance of Americans and a real belief that they know the solution.
So there is a danger with messianism then, you see?
That has been modified because mostly we've seen that if you go in and you just say, we're going to do it this way, it doesn't work. And there is a real emphasis, and as I said, that's an everyday conversation. Are we actually getting impact? And in order to get the impact, it has to be more collaborative. It's really not about controlling, it's about empowering.
Do we agree that, propaganda aside and cliches and slogans aside, that countries, especially countries, superpowers, serious countries like the United States, have interests, first and foremost?
Absolutely.
And whether it's USAID or whether it's Voice of America, it's meant to advance certain interests. I mean, this is clear.
And no apologies for it.
I mean, you guys have to put out fires that have been put on by your peers in government. I mean, you really have to make America look good in places where America behaved badly.
You know, we're not in the business of trying to make America look wonderful or do a propaganda snow job for the United States. We're in the business of providing reliable news and information to audiences that don't have enough of it, in our view. And yes, presenting our own country, explaining it to people. And we do it from an American perspective. We believe that we as a country have an interest in the rest of the world being well-informed, honestly well-informed, warts and all about the United States, and honestly about all things. Openness is something we believe in. As I mentioned earlier, in a way we export the First Amendment of the Constitution, the concept of freedom of speech, that it should be universal. That's an American value.
If I were Congress today, skeptical as it is with the Tea Party people and so on and so forth, should I be paying you for your organization? Should I be paying people in Detroit and Des Moines, Iowa? Is it worth the $750 million being paid for you? Are you really serving?
We reach 172 million people a week, Voice of America does. The whole of the Broadcasting Board of Governors effort, because you know there are some other companies, Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Asia, and so forth, it reaches 215 million people a week. But VOA itself reaches 172 million people a week. We provide reliable information to different audiences that's geared to what they're interested in, and also about our own country and our own foreign policy and so forth.
And you have competition now from the Chinese.
Well, it's interesting.
And the Russians.
RT and CCTV have been heavily funded in recent years. They're your competitors too. It'll be fascinating to see how this all plays out. The media markets are getting very complicated.
You also have a lot of competition from the Chinese.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think seeing development on the ground in Africa, competing for the heart and mind and soul of the African farmer, this is, I've seen an evolution. It's less about power. It's really more, the end game is about empowerment. I think this whole flow of information that's taking place is empowering. I think that's what the agenda of development should be. I think it should be the agenda of Voice of America, and we should move a little bit away from the power, control, dictate to empowering.
David, Christy, thank you so much. Much appreciated.